Chapter 16. I peek at the end of the abyss. I wasn't able to give an answer to the contract right away. For the time being I responded to Fema with "I will make up my mind before tomorrow morning." Fema nodded without showing any dissatisfaction in particular and returned to the inn she is staying at. A little bit later, the one who dropped her body on the chair Fema was sitting on until now is real this time. It is a little late, but how are you feeling? You have lost consciousness from receiving the backlash from the spirit art, haven't you? You've got great insight. My right arm still feels a little funny. I try to drag out my right arm from the bed, but the response is bad in every way. The part from my elbow to my fingertips doesn't listen to me. It felt that its actions were one beat late to the instructions I relayed from the beginning. Real touches my right hand. I dragged out and massaged it softly. I see, your muscles are becoming stiff. What about pain? It was terrible right after the backlash, but now I've got no pain. So it was so bad you can feel the pain. The reason must be that a considerable firm object was broken. She too had been taught the usual knowledge in relation to spirit arts by Grandma. She understood the reason I lost my consciousness. You did hear it from Fema and the servants, didn't you? The outline, yes. However, I also want you to let me hear your opinion on this. When it comes to breaking your ice, they should have considerably strong magic after all. Please explain from the beginning, just to be certain. Just as I was asked, I briefly explained to Real from the time the masked men attacked us until the time I fainted. It's just that my head isn't in a normal condition, so I told her beforehand that there are some parts in my memory that are unclear to me. I will be checking it, but how much time was there between the presence of that magic power and the invocation of the magic formula? There was about 1 or 2 seconds between that. But, what about that? After asking, Real put her hand on her chin for a while like she's thinking. I've taught you the general information in relation to magic during the time we stayed at the village at the foot of the mountains, didn't I? I'm not sure if I understood it completely though. That is fine. Generally, in order to use magic, you require magic power and a magic formula for the sake of controlling that magic power. You also use magic power to construct the magic formula, and by inserting magic power the second time into the finished magic formula, you invoke the magic. I can remember at least that much. In order to invoke magic, it becomes necessary to control magic twice. And so, the 2 times you control magic becomes more complex the stronger the magic becomes, and the required time will also increase. That is roughly the same as the fantasy knowledge in my mind. Is there something wrong with that? It looks like you haven't noticed it. I'm shocked, Real says as her eyes become half closed. This will be only a little off topic, but I'm proud of my considerable offensive ability. It's not at the level where you can end it with quite a few words, don't you think? Be quiet and listen. In addition, if I use body reinforcement magic as well, my power would jump up several times. Yeah, that was dreadful. A roughly 2-meter diameter lump of ice I created with my body and soul was cut right in half after all. My consciousness soared for 3 hours from the spirit art's backlash though. So you remember. The ice your spirit art created possesses a strength that took my all to be able to break it. And so, let's return to today's matter. No, I intended to make the ice cage sturdy, but I had no reason to put my all into it, you know. Slow, aren't you? Is your head still not cleared up from the effect of the backlash? Although you didn't put in all your strength, the intensity of the ice is also quite comparable to that of iron at the moment you made it. Also, A magic that blows up iron to smithereens is not as easy as a fire attribute magic that can bring forth instantaneous power. Ah! I finally arrived at Real's worries. You finally understand now. That's right. The time between the rise in magic power and the invocation is too short considering it's a magic capable of destroying your eyes. It's a different story if it was an elementary magic, but when it comes to power that can destroy an object possessing the strength of steel, it is impossible to do something like refining a magic formula in a mere 1 or 2 seconds. No, I won't say it is impossible, but what's certain is that a power on the level of a court magician becomes necessary for this, you see. So in other words, it's impossible if there's no people who are roughly able to cause destruction to thousands of people with just 10 of them? Now that you mention it, that magic power was pretty strange, you know. Strange, you say? I finally recalled after hearing about it though. The ice cage exploded and a pillar of flame broke out afterwards. Both have the same quality of magic power, but the presence was so dense it doesn't look like it belongs to a person. Now that my thoughts have become clear, I'm able to say it with confidence. It's not like I've seen enough of this world's people to the point of being able to assert this, but wait, huh? It's true that up until now I haven't seen anyone who possessed magic power that dense. But I'm bothered by it. I wonder if it's the atmosphere, if I have to say it. Honestly, I don't understand the difference in presence and atmosphere, but it's not so clear as to be called a presence. Even so, when I've noticed it once, it won't leave my head. I can't get it out of my mind. Have I come across this magic and the possessor of magic with a similar atmosphere? Speaking of acquaintances, is it Fema? No, I admit she possesses huge magic power, but it wasn't so dense that she had quit being human. And as for her servants, they didn't reach the level of a sorcerer Real told me about. The residents of this town too. Sometimes there are people with outstandingly high amounts of magic power, but not at the amount of Fema's. I rewind my memories. I recall the residents of the village at the foot of the mountains, but there were no sorcerers there in the first place. The spirit grandma I'm left with doesn't possess magic power like me, but she is an exception. Then, that soothing flying dragon summoned by Real? No, it may not be human, but it's still different. Going back even more. I don't really want to recall it, but it's that castle I was in at the beginning. Oh, I see. Of the places I've caught sight of people possessing magic power at a level that can be called a sorcerer, that castle had the most. However, each and every one of them are also different. I recalled my memories up to there, and the person in question wasn't there. I suspect it's a lapse of memories, though I deny that immediately. The presence of that magic power remained inside of me. Suddenly, I remembered Fema's face. Now that I think about it, there was someone holding a present similar to her. I forgot about that. In the shade of Fema's face, I could see a different person. My back shivers and froze in place. A strong chill and nausea swoops down on me and blood drains from my face. What's wrong, Kanna? Seeing my face becoming unusually pale, Real grabs my shoulders. However, I don't have any composure to put my awareness onto the girl. I finally reached it. The existence of that woman who houses that intense deep darkness inside her eyes. The existence of that woman who summoned me to this fantasy world and self-centered, haughtily and ruthlessly discarded me. It wasn't that I couldn't remember her. It was because I don't want to remember her. There's no way I will forget her. It's just that I had no choice but to forget her even just temporarily. Each time she emerges in my mind, I would recall my extreme anger and hatred. That doesn't change even now. But I can sense the magic power better than when I was summoned in the beginning, so that's why I also understand. No doubt the abyss is hiding in the depth of the eyes on that lovely beautiful face that can be called sweet. That abyss must be connected to that unusual magic power I felt. As I chew off the nausea and the chill I felt in one go, I feel my partner's hand placed on my shoulder. While feeling the warmth from a person that is not myself, I regain my composure in some way. Little by little, the blood also returned and the worried Real spat out a breath of relief after seeing my complexion. I look at the face of that girl. Real, I remember it now. Real returned a serious look once again. That guy who bursted down my eyes. The magic power I felt at that time is disgustingly similar to that bitch who summoned me to this world. Are you certain? Yeah. The difference in amounts of magic power is in a different league, so it's hard to know, but now that I recalled it I don't doubt it anymore. But, if we assume that, what would this all mean? I noticed just today that Fama's presence resembles that bitch. But at the same time Fama's presence is different from that of the magic power. Usually if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. However, it doesn't seem that simple in this subject. I have the conviction I won't be fooled by a few misunderstandings. That princess is sharp and able enough to be expected to become the next ruler from within the royalty, and at the same time she is magician enough to be the top 5 within her country. Real supplemented the brooding me. She also has the capabilities as a court magician without exaggeration. If it is her, then she should be capable of constructing magic capable of destroying iron weapons in an instant. However, the next in line being in this remote place is, so in this case, it's the queen. I don't know the reason for her to be in this location. In the first place, their presence may resemble, but I know that the bitch isn't in this place. Something else resembles this presence. Somehow I have a very bad feeling about this. I felt this unbearable discomfort towards this something the two have in common. Chapter 17. You're able to enjoy this muddled story because it's somebody else's problem. Sickness and health start with the mind. If we have that saying, then paradoxically, if the sickness is cured, then what's in your mind should be fixed. Sickness won't be cured if you don't have physical strength. And you must eat delicious things in order to gain physical strength. Well, it's something stupid I'm thinking about while I'm trying to eat. Say, I was actually thinking about this since we were in the village at the foot of the sacred mountain, but it's dinner time right when my right arm has recovered and I'm able to move it without any problems. In order to recover the force of will I've spent as a result of using spirit arts, and because I've become hungry like normal again, I've decided to have dinner. Ain't the amount you're eating clearly over capacity, Real? Being in the middle of my growth period, I pay additional charges to the inn and order 1.5 times the usual serving of a dish. That is probably quite a substantial amount of food. It's because a swordsman's asset is their body. If you don't properly eat whenever it's fine to eat, then you won't have the strength at the critical moment. Meanwhile, Real also took the same dish, but she has 3 servings or something. 3 times the usual, twice the amount I ordered. Even though we're sitting in a 4-seat table with the 2 of us, the table is filled to the limit. And even though she started eating roughly at the same time as I did, the ratio of food is disappearing is the same for us too. It's a dreadful story. How bad is the energy consumption of that body of yours? Normally, the things you eat become either fuel or flesh or something though. Since we're eating, I'm omitting the matter about excretion. If I take a glance, I can tell that Real's body is slender. With one glance I can judge a body that's identified as female. She has good looks that I'm sure could earn her fame as a model. On the other hand, I know that despite her limbs being supple if you were to touch them, they hide enough physical strength to freely handle that large sword at will. I have heard of this before by chance. It's the most ideal form of muscle. Even so, I'm sure that's still an excessive amount of calorie. I do admit that my energy consumption is certainly bad, but this doesn't mean that I won't put on any weight at all, okay? Real puts the tip of the fork in her mouth and expresses her complaints. There's probably some meat attached to her under her clothes. How can you think about carefree things? She says as she hits her breastplate with her hand. It's simple, I happen to have a constitution where it accumulates as much in my breasts as I've eaten whenever I eat. Good grief, even if they get any bigger, they will only become hindrances in combat, I tell you. My armor as well as my clothes. Because I don't fit in ready-made goods, I have to have them custom-made, so I'm also dealing with money. They're inconvenient things. What's wrong, Kanna? Sinking into silence suddenly. Perhaps the biggest surprise since coming to this world just held sway over me. Did she just say they can still get bigger? Reals that I mean. Teal's pair of hills already can't be described as anything other than giant breasts. Is she saying they'll evolve even further into explosive breasts? Breasts grow as much as I've eaten whenever I eat, she says. It's like a special constitution that would make women from all over the world cry in envy. If Ayana hears about this, she'll go crazy, I bet. I calmly look around the place and I realize that the fellows sitting inside the store are firmly straining their ears while pretending to be indifferent. The guy's interests in the two fruits are also mutual across the world. Furthermore, the not-so-few female guests here are looking at Real with jealousy and envious eyes. It's their impression regarding Real's prime beauty and the conversation just now. A slim and attractive figure and an attractive face are supposed to be characteristics of elves. It's extremely rare to pass by other elves like Real in town, but the breasts of the ladies, never mind the men, were slippery and flat, if you know what I mean. No, I'm fairly sure Real is a half-elf. So does that mean that one of their parents has strong giant breast genes? Thank you very much. Is what I want to go and tell that parent. My stomach is also bulging out and my energy is replenished. Real wraps up the conversation while we're enjoying the after-meal tea. So, have you come to an answer? Of course, it's about the contract Fame offered some time ago. As a senior in Journeys, what do you think about it, Real? While sipping the bitter black tea like tea, I request for her opinion. Listening to it, it's an exceptional treatment, isn't it? Taking responsibility for the entire expenses and the like. Usually these situations are mainly merchant groups who possess a plan within limitations or traveling aristocrat households. When it comes to individuals, a completion bonus is more than enough and most of the other travel expenses will be paid by themselves. As far as I heard the story, she seems to have grown well too. Apart from her physically grown-up breasts, she had an impression that her education among other things were seemingly quite high. At the time of our first meeting, she displayed quite a plain self-conceit, but I can agree that she's from a household with a name, like she said, to the point of maintaining politeness and keeping us company. If she can move that much money individually, then either she has very doting parents or the person herself is very good. As far as I can see from the person herself, it must be the latter. If I have to say it, I became curious when she didn't reveal her family name, but that is because it is usual for aristocrats to conceal their names and go on a journey. It's probably because they have ties of obligations. Aristocrats, that is. In the real world, Japan too has family lineages that have an ancient and honorable origin that continued from their former peerage. And not only do they have a history, they also have a household that rode on the currents of antiquity and obtained power. There's also one among the people I'm familiar with, and that person often spills out complaints. They are certainly a privileged class, but I can't deny that they are also a troublesome social position. Socializing with other households or territory management if you're a man. An uncomfortable life in one way or another through a political marriage. At first glance it looks glamorous and the facts are muddled. Real's face turns bitter and she drinks the bitter tea to make it look misleading. The world is different, but the darkness of the upper classes being deep doesn't change. To put it in other words, various things of the universal human societies may have been condensed because it is a cramped world. Miss Fama's position must also be in a political marriage, I guess. She has that much beauty and wisdom. She's very popular for sure. Her journey to Degal could be the last freedom she's been given before that. Quit it, don't make this conversation any heavier than this. It'll get harder to decide. If I only listen to that, I'll end up accepting it, don't you think? If Yuzuki was here, then he would become extremely angry at the time the political marriages and the like are announced. To put it bluntly, that guy only would act violent and don't think, and all kinds of various preparations were made by me in cooperation with the little girl in question. If we're going to do it, then we'll do it. So I want him to try and act more well-behaved. Setting that aside, if we properly exchange contracts with her, then we should have no problems as long as she doesn't commit any dishonesty. It's a surprisingly attractive negotiation if I only listen to it. We have a surplus in our savings, but if she will bear in mind the emergency expenses, then we won't have to worry about it no matter how much money she has. Taking the burden on the total expenses on various things surely is attractive. It's because we can go on a journey without putting our hands on our current savings. If it was the usual, we would be stupid not to accept this. If it was the usual, I unexpectedly noticed that preface. As I expected, are you curious about the owner of that magic power? It would be strange if I'm not curious about it, don't you think? Some time ago when Fama approached us with that proposal, my head still hadn't recovered yet to the point of being able to completely understand its contents. And now, my mind has recovered, my stomach is satisfied and my energy is full. But even so, what I'm still hesitating about is all because of that strange magic power I felt at the end of the attack. There's no doubt that the owner of that magic power used magic in order to save the masked men. You should know that too, Real. If we accept being Fama's escorts, then we will almost certainly clash with the owner of that magic power, you know that? I guess Fama brought up this proposal because of that. It's impossible for her to not realize this. It's magic that can emit super high heat enough to melt flagstones. If a person is directly hit by it, then they would carbonize on the spot, or they become ashes without leaving any trace and disappear. Even if the servants risk their life to try and protect their master, they will burn up along with him. Even if it's a financially attractive contract, the risk is too big. We're not so troubled with money that we have to put our lives at stake for the sake of a noble lady whom we just met yesterday, and we're not that soft-hearted either. If it was that idiot, then I bet he would readily accept the escort of Fama, but is it fortunate or unfortunate that he's not at this place? You're surprisingly cold, aren't you? You went out to help the daughter in the village at the foot of the mountain without hesitation, I tell you. That was me getting swept up by the course of events if I remember, but circumstances are circumstances. I also regretted the time I spent hesitating. In the first place, Weren't you also brimming with motivation to undertake that task? In my case, the hand I was dealt with was unusually limited, so there were a lot of situations where I inevitably had to rely on another person's abilities. So that may be why I don't hesitate to take someone's hands. Of course, I don't plan on taking someone's hand without compensation, and I'll also do reasonable transactions. If, at that time, Real misunderstood the agreement, I would be tempted to demand recompenses from the villager, I guess. Real gave the agreement before I could make demands, so it was lucky for us that we were able to shorten the time. If it was Yuzuki, he would decide immediately with zero time to consider it and also charge into the mountains at night with the intention to do this free of charge, that's for sure. He's a helpless guy when it comes to taking things into consideration, but sometimes I feel jealous towards that lack of hesitation, and grudges are also born towards the greatest heights of his ability. I've been associating with my incompetence for a very long time, so my jealousy and grudges disappear instantly, and also there's Yuzuki's degree of stupidity that outdoes all of that, so my anger would come out instead. As a result, it was a farce the spirit grandma played, though. Don't say that. The spirit lady as well as the villagers have apologized deeply, and you have also received a power that is useful to you. It's exceptional as a recompense in regards to the crime. That's also true, I guess. I leak out negative words one after another from my mouth, but if I only express arguments based on emotion without any reason, then I would believe it's fine to undertake the escorting of Fama. In the end, me and that guy may resemble each other in the roots. Otherwise, we would have never hung out together since around elementary school until now, though it's an undesirable but inseparable friendship. In any case, I'm at a loss as to whether or not pushing through reasoning with emotional arguments is me being cautious or me not being dependable. I keep calling Yuzuki a good-for-nothing and all, but on the contrary, I may also be good for nothing. So at a time like this we drink. Wait, why did it come to that? Hey, young lady. Some alcohol over here. Ignoring Real's calm retort, I ordered some fruit wine from the waitress. Real shrugs and also orders the same thing. By the way, there are no age limits to drinking alcohol. Generally it looks like you will develop a taste for it from the age of 15, so there are no problems, or should be. Do you mind if I also join you? Right when the waitress passed by to fetch wooden cups to pour the wine into, a voice called out from behind me. I turn around and a face I've seen before. Fama's head servant is there. Chapter 18 Professor in the End. Mr. Head Servant Rand lowers himself on one of the seats of the table we're sitting at and orders his own alcohol. As soon as his order arrives, he lifts up a cup out of thin air. Well then, first of all, I toast. We knock the cups together. As the container makes a dull sound from being made of wood, I take one gulp out of it. One cup after work is the best, isn't it? With the matter during the daytime, I can say I've worked right? Rand has a nice guy look, like a pretty boy who has piled up the right amount of years. Or more like, all of Fama's servants have well-featured looks on the whole, and Rand, who's at the top, also has looks that are at the top. Do I care? Did they not spare any daily training? I get more of a masculine impression from them rather than fresh, and their lean body can be seen even more when they're lightly dressed without armor. So this is the so-called slender macho. It's one of men's ideal physiques. If I was a woman I would be captivated by that for a while. First things first, I want to give you my thanks about the matter during the day. You may have heard it from Our Lady, but please let me say it once again. If it weren't for you, Mr. Kanna, we would have all perished without being able to protect Our Lady. As the chief attendant, we give you our heartfelt thanks. I waved my hand to Rand, who lowered his head very deeply and answered. That case is already settled, okay? We're receiving a certain amount of reward after all. That is a matter between public and private. Excuse me, but please accept it obediently. I embarrassingly point my eyes to Real, but she just nods while smiling. I guess it can't be helped, I think, and I silently accept his thanks. So? You probably didn't come here to say only that. Or are you truly here for the alcohol? Says Real while she puts down the cup she drank out of. I take another mouthful of the citrus-flavored fruit wine. It's good. I certainly did come here to give you my thanks, but the main question I have is something different. You don't say. While preparing himself, he tightened his serious face even more seriously and looked in front of me in the eye. So he has no intentions to have some silly talk over some drinks. What I want to say is, I've come to this place to request you to be Milady's Lady Fame's escort. This is the general consensus of all of us attendants, so there are no problems. Really, you attendants, it was a way of speaking that had no meaning in any way. What about the lady in question? Milady she doesn't know I've come to this place. This is my own judgment. If possible, I would like to request you to keep this a secret to the lady. I already thought so from the development, you know. I told you I would give you my reply tomorrow morning, didn't I? But that doesn't necessarily mean you will accept being her escort, now does it? No, that's why I'm telling you, I'm still in the middle of hesitating about that part. I've been stuck in between it the whole time until you got here, you know. It's about the lady. She certainly has given you a request to escort her, but I suppose she has no anticipation of a favorable response. We are also of the same opinion. No matter how high the rewards, if you are an adventurer who has gained experience, then you wouldn't give your word without much thought. In that respect, I can put more trust in you who didn't immediately agree. Although experience is experience, mine was that of a back alley fight. So you gave up halfway? If that's the case, then why are they in a place like this, Mr. Rand? Even if the prospects are low, putting our utmost devotion to our master is our duty. I moisten my dry lips with the wine. I wonder if you are seeing how serious of a situation this is, Sir Rand. We as well as Our Lady are similarly aware of it. Rand nods heavily towards Real's words. Lady Fama is from a certain noble house. There should be a myriad of perpetrators who would aim for someone like her. In reality, there has already been several attempts up until now at assassination just like this time and abduction. Go back home. Ah, shit. I unintentionally spoke up without thinking. Real puts her hand on her forehead as if to suppress a headache. You really can be frighteningly honest sometimes. No, it's just as he said. The actual problem in today's attack is that one wrong move, and I would have feared for the lady's personality. As long as I am truly concerned with her, going back home would be for the best. However, suddenly, his one hand that is holding the cup on the table is filled with strength. Like he is putting in his complex inner thoughts. We want to grant Our Lady her wishes. This is her final selfishness after all. What follows is generally what we expected. This year, Fama turns 18. Marriage talks also happen with her, who is born as a nobleman's daughter. She is rather a slow one among the aristocratic society, where it's normal to marry when you're 16. Or at the very least engaged. But it looks like she has turned them down until now. Our Lady, who was endowed with a rare talent as a sorceress, also held great interest in magic from outside the country for some time. However, she is restricted to knowledge from books. In addition to that, Acquisition itself is difficult when it comes to magic books from outside the country. I was taught only roughly about this, but sometimes magic may take an original system depending on the country. Even if it's magic with a similar effect, the composition of the magic formula that's composed of it creates a difference in each country. The me who can't use magic can only imagine, but the difference is probably like a difference in the pronunciation of an American in Japanese. If their composition varies, then strengths and weaknesses will also exist and variations in scale or chanting speed will appear. If the marriage is done, then the lady herself will be all the more bound to the house. For this reason, Lady Fama had requested it to his father, the head of the house, that she wants to study the magic of the other countries before she's engaged. However, as I mentioned before, there are many people aiming for Our Lady. He couldn't possibly let his daughter go out of the country so readily. I don't know where the head is from, but that's an appropriate judgment. I see. I can see where this is going. Real nods as she understood. If Miss Fama were to be engaged, then she will be able to carry on with her business as she pleases. Am I correct? That is correct. Even if it means becoming a priestess if she doesn't accept. What does that mean? This is how it is. She approached the head with the following proposition. As compensation for going outside the country to study magic, she will agree to the engagement that she has come to support. She even said she would enter the church and become a sister if she could not accept it. It would give her parents a bigger peace of mind if she makes a firm promise in the subject of marriage after it's over rather than proposing a drawn-out postponement on the engagement. The lady has quite the ability to take action, doesn't she? Is what only I can't say. In fact, she's not only talking big there, but she will properly realize that though Our Lady did not merely have a sheltered upbringing, you see. Real and I are halfway astonished. Under such circumstances, we just wish to safely end this journey at the very least. When this journey ends, what awaits Fama is a constrained married life. In that case, I would like her to enjoy the freedom even if only for a little time. For that sake we have volunteered in accompanying her in this journey. And there is merit in risking your life for this? That is what we're thinking at least. She really is loved, that Lady Fama. Is honestly the impression I have. But, is this such a sad world that this can't become a simple moving tale? There are circumstances around Fama no matter where they go, and we're outsiders no matter where we go. No matter how much of a tearjerker this story is, there's no obligation for us to get involved in this. There are no obligations, but, to be frank with you, I feel that as a fellow woman I would like to grant her wishes. If the situation had changed I wouldn't be so reluctant to lend you my strength though. While saying so, Real looked my way. She must mean that she would have accepted it had I not gone on a journey together with her. I spent around 5 minutes briefly putting together my thoughts, and then I made up my mind. Let's just go with shouting "you coward" to Rand within my mind. I think that you would have accepted being Miss Fama's escort in the end. Afterwards, when Rand had gone back, Real and I ordered a second cup. Naturally, my answer towards him was why yes. We promised to bind a contract with them under the premise that we will have them supplement several conditions. Originally the swinging of the scales was biased. And the conversation with Rand delivered the finishing blow to it. In the end you say you're a man burning with righteousness more than you think. Else you would have never considered taking me out from the castle in that situation, and you would have not even tried going to the girls' rescue in the village at the foot of the mountains. Despite having harsh complaints coming out of your mouth, you can't help lending a helping hand to those who need it. Talking like you understand me. I face away from Real and gulp down the alcohol. The alcohol that's stronger than the one I had before burns my throat and heats up my stomach. While becoming ill-humored, I admit in my mind that what Real said was on point. To tell you the truth, if this story about Fama didn't roll in, then I wouldn't have thought that the strange magic power would have any relationship with her. I still maintain that that has nothing to do with me. If I didn't meet Fama and was confronted with that magic power, then I would for sure choose to avoid it with all my strength. Even so, why I accepted it is probably because I got my hands on this handy power called spirit art. Even if I myself am an incompetent person, that power can be used to save someone. If you have something you can do, a desire you want and the will to achieve it, then there should be no need to hesitate. Except only for an instant. I have this premonition saying, "Won't that strange magic power?" and I have various connections with each other wherever I go in the distant future. I immediately denied that though. Ultimately, that was only a wish of mine. Chapter 19. Nobody has said I'm not allowed to do something like throwing at horse carriages really to shake around surprisingly. Is that so? Even so, this carriage is quite the first-class one, you know. If it was like the one ordinary citizens use, then it would shake even more than this. The comfort of the horse carriage I'm riding on for the very first time in my life is worse than I imagined. Real is sitting next to me and is acting calmly in contrast to me, who is leaking out complaints. When I think about it a little, there is a clear difference between the vehicles from the real world and the horse carriages from the fantasy world. Before talking about something like the driving force being horsepower, the wheels of the vehicles over there are basically made of rubber, but the wheels here are made of wood. I haven't seen any products made of rubber since coming to this world. Even the axle part doesn't seem to have anything like a shock-absorbing suspension and the like, and also the road isn't paved in concrete and it's just soil that's lightly leveled. So of course it would shake. Being able to sleep anywhere as long as I can keep my head in a fixed position is one of my few redeeming features, so that's why the shaking is not that much of a problem. But even if you say how little it is, ain't this tough for the lady if it shakes like this the whole time? Although it is temporary, I am prepared for the various inconveniences of journeys the moment I left my house. Besides, this is practice. It was certainly difficult in the beginning, but now I am not particularly concerned about it. Real and my new employer, Fama, doesn't even show any dissatisfaction and is instead smiling sweetly. There I feel the sturdiness a secluded lady wouldn't have. The next morning after Rand's visit, we visited the inn we were told beforehand where Fama is staying. The reason is, of course, to form an official contract with each other. When we paid a visit to the room, Fama's eyes were blinking weakly the first thing in the morning, but as soon as we mentioned we're accepting the aforementioned discussion, she woke up right away and took my hand too excitedly. I was surprised due to the insufficient opportunity of touching women and her unexpected joy. It's just that this time, we had them only add one condition to the contract. If we're employed as an escort, then I myself would have no intentions to hesitate playing my hands. However, my spirit art is a fitting observation target for Fama. I didn't tell her it's something that can be done immediately, and it doesn't mean that even I have grasped this power completely. More like, I don't know the methods of explaining it to her. That being the case, we took out the condition that they would refrain from meddling with this spirit art. I'm forcing Fama to accept this as magic though. Being offered that condition, Fama received just a little shock though. The spell Mr. Kamishiro is handling is certainly fascinating, but I won't be able to escape an urgent problem without making some sacrifice, so I suppose I have no other choice. is what she said and immediately accepted. She must have predicted we would have presented some sort of condition. Currently, around 3 hours has passed since departing from the town. It's still early to call it noon. We just departed, but no trouble has happened so far. Hey real, how long until we reach the next town? If we don't run into any particular problems, then it should take 4 days or something along that line. Fortunately, from here flatlands with a good view will continue on for a little while. We may possibly encounter magic beasts, but we should not have too much to worry about bandit raids. So there are no outlaws who would go out of their ways to approach us directly in the flatlands, where there are no covers to hide behind. As for magic beasts, they basically don't hold any intelligence, so they would disregard that sort of thing. It's just that magic beasts who have the intelligence of a common folk seems to exist, but they mostly possess absurd abilities, and if 10 of them gather, then a whole country can be led to ruin. I only wish in earnest that I won't meet them by chance in my whole life. By the way, my lady, although it's going to be a short while, we'll be traveling together. So just in case, please tell me the magic you're good at. You bastard, are you planning on letting the lady fight? I spoke of a question that's reasonable to me, but one of the servants raised a voice of criticism. Rand is the coachman of the carriage and another is walking behind the carriage as a patrol. The last servant is inside the carriage hood. Every single one of the servants are without exception handsome guys, and he's also without a doubt handsome. Compared to Rand, who appears rugged, he looks young, probably somewhere in his 20s. Though not as much as Yuzuki, he looks cool enough to be basked in high-pitched cheers from women. That kind of Mr. Handsome is glaring at me. That depends. In a cornered situation, we may need all the strength from the people here, don't you think? But aren't us guards and you bastards we employ here in order to prevent that? Listen here, I am only speaking about the worst-case scenario. Of course, not letting the lady be exposed to danger is the best. I have no objections to that. It's just that, I think that always moving under the assumption of the worst-case scenario is the job of a guard, that's all. Stiffly putting together rules would conversely make it difficult to move. What's necessary is several hands you can play in a sudden change of situation. The more hands you can play, the more you can increase the available options, and I have experience turning the tables on the whole battle situation with just a single hand. I'll take that novice know-it-all like mouth of yours, and I intended to give an accurate explanation on the theory, but Mr. Handsome doesn't seem to be pleased with that. I wonder what's wrong. The other party is a pretty boy, so was it wrong for me to recite that from my mind? Or was it wrong for me to stare at the lady's bouncing breasts whenever it shakes violently once in a while? Was it wrong for me to imagine which one is bigger, hers or the pair of hills inside Ril's breastplate? Huh? Is this something you would normally get angry about? Stop that, I got. Mr. Kamishiro's words are correct. If you say so, milady. Mr. Handsome draws back with only a single sentence from the mistress. Serves you right, is what I couldn't even think of. If a newbie acts arrogant, then they'll be the guy who won't feel good if people don't do very well. My most proficient attribute is wind, and I am focused on offense and support spells. Next to that, I can handle elementary level magic on the other 3 attributes. I am inexperienced, so I have not achieved acquisition of any superior attribute. In magic there are the fundamental 4 attributes. Including the superior 4 attributes, you can roughly divide them into 3 categories. Offensive spells that put emphasis in power. Resistance spells that keep defense in mind. Support spells that are specialized in support. They call these spell characteristics. The effects in magic are generally determined on the spell attribute and characteristic. Usually, every person has aptitude in a single basic attribute as well as one of the spell characteristics, and you will focus on those and also learn other magic. There is an exception to everything. Real is a good example for that. To make up for the lack of a specially strong attribute, she excels in resistance spells of all attributes and specific support spells. She can't use any offensive spells, but only a portion of the elementary level ones, but she has the super vanguard role, so in that case she has just the right aptitude. Adding to that, Ran can also control fire attributed offensive spells and support spells. Agat and the last one can control neither offensive nor support spells, but they should provide a decent challenge to Rand if it's only through swordsmanship, isn't that right? This became quite a well-balanced party, doesn't it? I'm also a vanguard if anything, but I'm closer to a guerrilla because of me also being able to handle long-range attacks with my ice spirit art. With Real and the other two as the vanguards, Rand and I would be at the center. And just in case, Fema will give support in the back. To be more lavish, you'd want the healing part there, but with the learning of recovery magic that's included within the support spells being difficult, those people generally run as a doctor and very few would take on jobs like an adventure. So it isn't as simple as learning it just by spreading your skill points with one click. Fema and Real look puzzled at the mysterious expression for this world, but I smile and gloss it over. You bastard, are you by chance trying to say that you and Mr. Rand are equals? No really, I was just calmly trying to understand our war potential, you know? Mr. Handsome Agat snaps at me again. Mr. Rand is the most influential person among us. You bastard may seem to be able to handle yourself more or less, but you are no match to Mr. Rand. Know your place. Look, I know that more than anybody else. I was able to win some leeway up to that back alley fight. I've been associated to my own incompetence for almost 17 years. After all, I'm used to being ridiculed and spoken ill of by people. My mind won't shake with this degree of hostility with no malice. However, with this situation, he doesn't think well of me going with Fema as her escort. Last night, Rand was talking like the hearts of all attendants were won, but it feels like they reluctantly agreed because it's the words of the head servant. What's with those eyes? Are you making fun of me, you bastard? He really can flare up on whatever I say, this guy. It has the force that makes the words of the guy he doesn't like become the target of complete denial. Is he a kid? I'm pretty much a brat, but this guy's even worse. No, everyone will become a kid if they become agitated. I pray he will be an extraordinary excellent escort once he's calmed down. Some time passed after that, and at the time when the 12-hour clock was switched, we took a lunch break. They untied the horse from the carriage, tied him to the tree that grew at just the right place, and let him eat the grass around it. We get off the carriage and take our break the way we like while we loosen our muscle that's gotten tight from sitting. Real and I perform some training in fighting techniques before lunch. It's not a genuine one like the time in the town, but it's something like a light physical training. I would have wanted to use my eyes spirit arts if that was possible, but Fema and the others have their eyes here, so I refrain from doing so. We forbade them to speak, but if ice is produced right in front of their eyes, then Fema's curiosity would probably run wildly again. Real is doing practice swinging and checking her posture, and I'm doing some flexible exercises and I'm warming up my body. When I loosened my body after several minutes, I was about to start my exercises. Hey, bastard. Mr. Agat calls out to me as I'm checking the fasteners of my arm guards. As usual, it was that kind of confrontation, so time didn't pass, but he has a stern expression like he has something he can't stand. He had a wooden stick sword held in each hand, and he threw the one in his left hand at me. I received it out of reflex, but I'm just perplexed at this. Mr. Agat speaks, unconcerned about my state of mind. Stand ready. I shall be your opponent. Is this what you call hazing the noob? Although the troubled me is looking at Fame and Rand with the request for help, Real's words cut in before they could open their mouths. I don't think it's bad to have a bout with someone besides me once in a while, don't you agree? She stabbed the sword she had been swinging on the ground. She supports the training with me and Agat. This is a strange way of saying it, but my fighting style is that of a minority. It's closer to the wrong way that's off from the proper way of fighting. In addition to that, using a weapon you're not familiar with on a routine basis is also training. You should also consider the possibility of having to use any weapons available at hand. You mean, like using this wooden sword? Also take off the arm and leg guards, Kanna. Naturally, that is also forbidden. There is no problem if you use it to protect yourself in an emergency, but I will be judging it as your defeat in that case. If I'm told as much by the usual coaching role, then I can't complain. Her words make sense and I can also understand that well enough. When I take off the belt where the arm and leg guard are fixed on and have become light-footed, I once again grab the wooden sword and try some practice swinging as a test. I had moments I used a wooden sword and iron pipes for that. Will cheats work? I have advanced the conversation as I pleased, but this isn't a problem for Sir Rand and Miss Fama, is it? Like I said, I would like Kanna to pile up experience even if a little for me, you see. It's no problem, says Rand and nods to Real's question. Everything is moving the way I would like. Agat is not negligent in the constant training with us, but training with someone besides us will become good experience, I hope. Besides, I am also interested in his way of fighting. Gauging the abilities of the companion you will be fighting shoulder to shoulder is also necessary, don't you agree? I can hear uneasiness in the voice full of anticipation. I'm confident that what I'm about to show them from now will be quite an uncool fighting style. Real. My bad, but I'm a genuine novice with the sword, so I'll be going with what I've taught myself, okay? It's not officially the time to do training either, this is purely an emergency countermeasure. Mr. Agat, you don't mind it either, right? Do what you like. Together with a short reply, he points his sword to my eyes. It's an expert posture, but it lets me feel a weight he didn't add to himself with only a day of training. As I think about going with a similar posture, my thoughts stop. The difference in years is clear. Even if we had the same start, it was clear this won't become a contest. How will I attack? I once again observe Agat's posture. No matter how long a fencing novice looks at the posture, I can at most understand information that can be read. Quickly adopt a posture, you bastard. Or perhaps, have you lost your nerve? Even if he spews out words of provocation, his expression is sharp. The air is so tense like it's on the verge of cutting strings. Not a single gap can be felt, but at the same time he has no leeway in his mind. I hit upon an idea. Of course, it's an idea I've used during the time I was in the real world. It's an effective measure even against people who have studied the correct path of swordsmanship. Alright then. As I'm holding the sword in one hand, I twist my arm and turn it round and round. I continue turning my sword with Mr. Agat making a dubious expression. Real. Please start counting from 3. Are you not adopting a posture? It's fine. Real follows the point of the sword in my hand with her eyes and before she shrugs her shoulders and begins the countdown. I'm sorry. What I'm going to do now is a strategy that is difficult to pull off if I can't predict the beginning to a certain extent. 3. Let me be frank with you. No matter how I use my self-taught swordsmanship, I don't have a shred of chance to win against him. I'm convinced I can't even win against those thugs who attacked Fama. 2. I'm no match for him with sword skill. So in that case, how should I fight my opponent? The answer is simple. I can just get rid of the bout between fellow swordsmen. You don't have to be able to stand on the field your opponent is specialized in. 1. The last second. Mr. Agat puts his strength into the sword in his hand. It's a step you take to attack at the same time as the start. As for me, I step far forward with my left foot, lowering my posture. I draw my body's springs and store my strength. And at the end I shift the sword in my right hand in an underhanded grip and pull my arms. 0. Together with the start signal, Agat steps forward in a grand way. It's a quick step. If you took a stance the usual way, a point would probably be taken from you without you being able to respond to his movement. That's why I didn't take a stance like usual. I had no intention of swinging the sword in the first place. My left foot is going far in front of me. My hand is holding the weapon in an underhanded grip. That's right, this is a form of javelin throw. Fury. Pointing towards Agat who is quickly rushing and approaching me, I put all my strength into throwing the wooden sword. The wooden sword that gained quite a lot of speed runs through the sky towards Agat's face. I bet he didn't expect I would ever throw it. Agat gets very surprised and his rush weakened. And then, the approaching wooden sword flicked off the wooden sword he is carrying in his hand. Although he's surprised, intercepting a wooden sword with that kind of speed in midair is as you can expect. But the response to the follow-up after the wooden sword being flicked away was late. It's none other than the presence of me. He hardened his body from becoming even more surprised by me who broke into a run immediately following the throwing of the sword. To say. There I do a full speed, all-out ram attack. The trick is to aim your thrust diagonally upwards from the shoulder. If my impact can win from the opponent's weight, then the opponent's body would float somewhat and that would destroy his posture. Just as I had aimed, he stumbled a step or two from being unable to bear the impact. There I do a low-altitude tackle. With the trick to mow the opponent's legs, I hold both his feet. If I can take his feet while his balance is destroyed, then soon he can do nothing but fall down. As my opponent falls down the ground, I immediately release both his feet and quickly move my body to take on the form of straddling on his body as he is. Now that it comes to this, I can do whatever I please. Before he could raise his voice and say ah, I stuck my first out in front of Mr. Agat's face as I got into a mount position. Game, set, match, I suppose. Now that I think carefully, this isn't training, is it? Chapter 20. Why does Ojisan feel more playful than Ojisan? Also a new skill development while I'm at it. It's a fact that I snatched away victory from Agat, but Real scolded me immediately afterwards, saying there's completely no meaning in using the wooden sword with that. I also noticed it in the end. Thereafter I was told any attacks that use anything beside the wooden sword, in other words blows that uses hands or feet, are forbidden, and I made another effort in training with Mr. Agat. The result? It was a complete defeat after 5 minutes of fighting him. At the beginning of the fight I was at my wit's end from his offense so severe, like he was avenging himself, and points kept being taken from me. After great pains or something, I didn't bear any injuries I went down with, but my head and flanks were hit hard among other places, so it's extraordinarily painful. He was absolutely aiming at the places that weren't covered by armor, didn't he? Given that I also didn't understand his feelings, I won't complain. I reap what I sow is what I told myself. To be blunt, that was a fighting style that can be said to be a bad plan within a bad plan against opponents above a certain level. Surprises like surprise attacks hardly work on them. In the first place, there was no concept of surprise attacks. The throwing of the wooden sword should have been recognized as an attack, and each of my follow-ups afterwards should have been intercepted. These sort of tricky techniques won't work against the kinds of people who are good at breaking through them. Would you mind me sitting next to you? After the break ended, we boarded the horse carriage as we chewed on dried jerky and washed it down with water, and we departed once again. This time Mr. Agat is the coachman. I've been reflecting on the training I've had just then in the corner of the carriage. Rand excuses himself and sits down near me. I'm really sorry there, for not being able to stop that boy Agat. No, he'll look like he would explode if he doesn't let out a little steam here or something. And it's just like Real said. Training with someone beside her is also experience. Quite the philosophic way of thinking you have there, despite your appearance. The appearance part was uncalled for. I'm not really a guy who knows how to swim the tide, and I'm used to being at the end of someone's grudges. After all, I'm strong since I've been beaten black and blue. The weak being trampled is the truth. That isn't something you should be humble about, don't you agree? I've only glanced at the first battle, but you raised a mark of victory on him. That boy's abilities are at the top among the young people serving Lady Fama's esteemed household. He's no opponent you can win with a fluke. The top, huh? I gaze at the back of Agat on the coachman's seat holding the reins of the horses. He has calmed down somewhat compared to before, but even so the atmosphere is still stiff. What kind of person does Mr. Agat look like from your perspective? Let's see here. It's an honest expression, but he's a good young man. In spite of possessing talent, he repeats training without being haughty about it. He may also be a mine of excessive honesty, but that on itself is also a virtue. I would like for him to be a little more flexible. A seriously straight-laced guy, right? I haven't had that type of person around me. That Yuzuki fellow is usually the no-good pretty boy, and Masaki is the energetic girl. Ayana is somewhat of a natural airhead. I have the role of the break, but I think I was a relatively soft break. We didn't have that sort of committee chairman type of person among us. Rand's mouth warped to my unreserved words. Quite direct, aren't we? I don't hate him, you know. I find them a little difficult to deal with. It's just that I have to keep in mind interpersonal relationships a little, you know, that's all I'm thinking of. I would like you both to be on good terms for me though. That's why I said I don't hate him. That part will be a future development from now on, so it'll be fine if we have to compromise together. As expected, trouble would occur if the whole thing was heard by the person himself. So up until now we've been talking secretly with quite a low voice. Back to the topic of the previous training. It may have been a bad experience for him, but it was a good experience. His way of talking is bad, but he has still got a long way to go, what with his posture crumbling from that level of surprise attack. He can't respond to his opponent's surprise attack in that condition. Dropping the low voice we've been doing up until now, Rand returns to his normal volume. He talks with the intention of letting Agat hear him. Agat didn't have enough experience, though I myself don't have enough either to say that to others. He's strong in a fight right from the front, but because of his path of righteousness he had insufficient experience with opponents who would attack their opponent's weaknesses. The enemies aren't limited to waiting for the starting signal before attacking, nor are they limited to attacking from the front. Rather, they're constantly attacking suddenly and they're clear to aim for our openings. Even in the previous case, you challenged the fight in a strange way and constantly aimed at our blind spots. It's useless to curse at your enemy for cowardice just before death. What's necessary is the preparedness and the experience to allow you to deal with your enemy's actions at any time. What he said has the same meaning as what I was talking about this morning. They were words that indirectly acknowledged what I had said. Whoa, wait just a minute. Can you really let him hear that? Look, Mr. Agot's shoulders are quivering a little. He's pointing his brunt of "I want him to stop" to me. When I glare at Rand with a look of criticism, he once again talks with a low voice. I'm sorry to you, but please endure it and consider this as an addition to the contents of our contract. I have expectations for that man's talent. If he were to possess a certain level of flexibility on top of that, is what I've always been thinking. If there is someone like you nearby who uses the wrong path, even he may be able to grasp something. You're not praising me, are you? Well, I never. I am certainly praising you more than enough in my eyes. The nice guy is showing a smile meaningfully. This Mr. He's quite the ruffian despite his appearance. Well, I guess he won't be fit as a commander if he can't do that much. This time's on the house. And I could only tell him the remunerations in relation to the addition to our contract. Since then, our travels have advanced well for several days. Magic beasts attacked us several times on the way, but we were able to deal with them without any problems. Actually, Real and Agot as well as the other servants immediately exterminated them, so there's pretty much no turn for me. Speaking of my normal job, I've been training with Mr. Agot before lunch breaks. The score is generally Mr. Agot taking the lead. It's just that as a special rule that we repeat about every 5 fights, we only use swords for 4 out of 5 fights, and only in the remaining fight I'm able to do anything I like without limits. Only in that one fight I am somehow able to snatch away a win from Agot. I feel just a little satisfied with that. But really, he's weak against surprise attacks, you know. When I'm being sneaky and his pace breaks once, I could completely drag him around. On the other hand, as long as his pace doesn't crumble down, he wouldn't even slightly waver by my improvised swordsmanship. The strongest people among the swordsmen I'm acquainted with have the strength to be good. It's loss upon loss for me if you only look at the results, but I think this is an unusually meaningful time to me. A fight with an orthodox swordsman besides an ultra-power fighter like Real is an experience necessary in order to live in the time to come. It's just that, well, I also can't afford to temper only my swordsmanship. To use anything I can use is my principle. I wonder if it's fine around here. Evening of the 4th day since leaving the previous town. Just like Real had said, we had arrived at the next inn town. It's a lot smaller than the town I met Fame at, but as a resting point for travels, it seems to be flourishing in its own way. Right now I'm loitering at the plains a little separated from the town. Time has passed since the sun has set and there's no light, but that is no problem. The starlight in the sky you can't see in real-world Japan, and the presence I feel on my skin tells me the situation around me. The visit to such a deserted place is solely for the sake of training my spirit art. With the eyes of Fame et al. For several days I've been refraining from using it, but I've been going with just image training too in the meantime. It's a short stay, but I want to study whether the practical form of the image is effective or not right now, when I can settle down in town. Ryolu has always accompanied me and my spirit art training isn't here. Given that this time I'm only giving shape to my image, quite a useless production could appear. I plan to attempt doing this together with Ryol on another day and finalize the design after I've completed a more precise shape. Now, let's start, shall we? I concentrate my consciousness in my right palm. Like the image I've drawn in my mind, the molded object is born along with the pakiri sound. Its shape is a thin and flat elliptical shape. Both ends are made sharp, becoming a sharp-edged tool. Next, I have made a cross of about 2 meters at a distance from the current location and another one of about 1 meter beside it. Of course, the raw material is ice. This time, these will be the substitute for a target. In order to ascertain its condition, I hold the grip of the elliptical shape I created with ice between my index and middle finger and throw it with a backhand swing. My aim is, of course, the ice cross I've made at a distant place. A jin sound of unrelenting collision between the two fellow ice objects reverberated and the elliptical-shaped ice I threw had penetrated halfway into the center of the intersection of the cross. Continuing this, I furthermore create about 3 of the ice elliptical shapes I created before, hold each of them in between my right fingers and throw them. This time they also pierced in the intersection of the cross just as I aimed for. What I'm going for right now is the development of a long-range attack. Up until now I've been creating lumps of ice and have thrown them, kicked them or launched them towards opponents far away. But I've been thinking, isn't there a more efficient way to attack them? In RPGs there is often a skill or something where you create a lump of ice in the sky and project it towards the enemy just like that. That is also something that can be done, but I either lack training or I can't put in enough strength. More importantly, I can actually put in more strength if I acquire the support of the spirits after throwing it after all. This elliptical shape ice is, so to speak, the shape I've come up with in order to handle that much more efficiently. Reference is the ninja's frequently used shuriken. Everyone's thinking that shuriken equals cross shape, but that is, to be blunt, a generic name for small arms mainly for throwing. What I've made right now is a type called stick shuriken. I've heard in one explanation these are mainstream for ninjas. Well, it's also troublesome to make those cross shapes each and every time you know. For now, a shuriken can be made with this ice. How about I call this ice shuriken from now on? Quite simple, huh? It's easier to imagine it if I add a name to it, and I'm the only one who can use this, so I won't accept any complaints. I can create the ice shuriken afterwards and throw them single-mindedly. I'm going to refine the image in order to throw it with the shortest execution and bring out the maximum power. Up. Until now it's a 3-stage course of image greater than creation greater than grab created object and throw it. I'll shorten it to a 2-stage course of image greater than throw while creating them. I would swing my arm and throw it as I create it during the swing. I'll instill that behavior into my body. What's ideal is where I'd let it go from my fingers the moment it's created, that kind of condition. This way I can throw ice shurikens just by swinging my arms. It roughly took 5 hours and the attack method as I imagined was completed. Jiraiya. The target substitute crosses I've made were 6. And the amount of ice shurikens I threw by swinging both my arms were also 6. The ice shurikens sharply ran through the air and have splendidly pierced into the center of the 6 crosses. Following that I continuously swing my arms, rapid-firing ice shurikens. Gega gega sound resounds as they pierce the crosses one by one. The moment when the 6 targets couldn't endure it and completely broke, a part of the ice shuriken development was completed. I plan to experiment whenever I come up with something. Fu. After I take in one breath, the air I then exhale is dyed white. The ice shurikens are small one by one, but if you pile up trash it will also become a mountain. A fair number of ice shards are scattered about. Incidentally, even if the ice born from spirit arts are released from the influence of the spirits, it keeps its shape without melting for a far longer time than regular ice. They appear to be absorbing the heat in the neighborhood, so the air has become quite chilly. The ambient temperature didn't go as far as Hokkaido, but it has gone to the ambient temperature of Tokyo in the winter. I once again house in the spirits from the ice wreckage in the surroundings and wear them on my finger. Together with a gentle sound, all of the surrounding ice vanished without a trace. I feel like snapping my fingers. Would I ruin it if I say, "Ain't that cool?"